Welcome to All Grown Up Now, a tale of retail, relocation, revenge, reinvention, reckless behavior, really good clothes, indiscretion, infidelity, domestic violence, and one kidnapping. I'm Kenneth D. King, podcasting from my studio near Union Square, New York City. This podcast is another of a series of installments from a novel I wrote called All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts, available as an ebook or a printed book from Amazon.com. It's the story of a small-town boy who dreams of being a grown-up and his journey to get there. Each week, you'll hear another installment of this story. In our last episode, we followed Ken through some of his high school trials and noted fashion disasters. In this next episode, we'll hear about some of his amateur law breaking. Then we'll find out how his 10-year class reunion turned out. Episode 2, Can I Drive Your Car? The place is Oklahoma City. The time is the mid-1970s. As far as law-breaking went, I was a real amateur as a teenager. Since I didn't do drugs or drink, I had to have some form of rebellion. As I mentioned, my rebellion was driving cars before I was of legal age to do so. By the time I was 15, I had driven about 10 or 12 cars. It was surprisingly easy. I would just ask, and more likely than not, someone would hand me the keys or stop the car and get out to let me drive. There were a couple of times I got caught. The first was the last day of 9th grade. I skipped school, which was the only time I ever skipped school, and we went around with my friend Larry in his mother's brand new sapphire blue Olds Delta 88 Royale. It had a white vinyl top and white interior with bucket seats and the stick shift in the center console. It had Paul McCartney and Wings on the 8-track tape player. Wow. How Larry got it without her knowing, I don't know, but he wasn't legal yet either, so I asked him if I could drive. Sure, you want to go pick up your sister and cruise around the lake? So off we went to pick up Kathy at home, pulling up and honking, and then screeching the tires as we sped away. When we came home, I got the mail. Looking through the mail, I found an envelope addressed to Mrs. King with no stamp or return address. So I did what any sensible teenager would do. I opened it.
Uh-oh.
Dear Mrs. King, it read, I thought you should know that I saw your son driving a blue Oldsmobile this afternoon, license plate number blah, blah, blah. There was no signature, but it looked like the work of our lard-ass next-door neighbor, Mrs. Knapp, who, instead of minding her own business and spending her time keeping up with her housework, snooped on all of the neighbors. She even had permanent marks on her nose from the binoculars. The note went straight to the bottom of the garbage can. Another friend in junior high, named Joe, had divorced parents. He lived down the street from me and was a couple years older. Joe had black hair and white skin, and sadly was rather on the odd-looking side. He looked somewhat like a vampire with bad acne. I hope he grew out of it. Joe took full advantage of his dad's suffering from guilt about the divorce. During those summer days, Joe drove us around in his mom's white Dodge Dart with the avocado green vinyl interior after taking her to work. Little did she know. After a while, this arrangement proved to be too complicated with him taking his mom to work and picking her up, so his dad was guilt-tripped into buying Joe a brand new white Subaru. Now remember, this was in the mid-'70s, so Subaru was a rather ugly and not very fast car with next to no cachet. But it was new, had a cassette tape deck, and 4 on the floor. Joe was in heaven. The two of us would take the Subaru out, tool around OKC, and while away the summer afternoons. He was protective of his new car, but soon I had him talked into letting me drive, and I learned to shift and clutch quite well. As my grandma used to say, if you were doing something you shouldn't be doing, somehow, sometime, it would tell on you. I always thought she was being an old stick. However, one afternoon, while I was driving Joe's car along 23rd Street, a main drag in my day, we passed the intersection of 23rd and Glade. Joe let out a shriek. I slammed on the brakes and looked to the right, only to see Joe's mom in her car at the intersection. Oh my God. The squealing tires got her attention, to be sure, and once she looked, she saw Joe in the passenger seat. She tore out of the intersection in hot pursuit. I hit the gas and pulled out ahead, which was astonishing given the kind of car I was driving, and by the time we got to the intersection of 23rd and Council, Joe and I had switched places and he was in the driver's seat. We were stopped at the light when his mom pulled up behind us and got out of the car. She stormed up and yelled in the driver's window, "You get home, and you," pointing at me through the window, "are in some real trouble, mister." Oh, fuck, I can imagine it now. She'd call my mom, or worse yet, come over and tell her in person, and I'd be really busted. I was shaking so bad I thought I'd wet myself. The ending was sort of anticlimactic. She never said anything to Mom, but I wasn't allowed to see Joe after that. His mom thought I was a bad influence. Imagine that. The most troublesome driving experience, though, wasn't trouble because of the driving. I worked at Brahms Ice Cream on 23rd and Rockwell. It was the summer job I got when I was 15, and Mom issued the ultimatum that I'd better have a job or else. I never knew what or else meant, I just knew it wasn't good. There was also a girl who worked there named Kathy M., who was my sister Laurie's age. Kathy M. had a really cool burgundy late 60s Chevy Impala with mag wheels, thrush pipes, and 4 on the floor, and it was hiked up in the back. One night, Kathy M. and I were working, and she offered me a ride home. "Can I drive your car?" I asked. I asked everyone. "Sure, if you can drive a stick." So I called Laurie to tell her that she didn't need to pick me up because I was riding home with Kathy M. This should have come as good news to Laurie, as it gave her more time to boink Bill the mechanic, her boss, at the 2-pump gas station, where she was the bookkeeper. A little backstory is in order here. Laurie couldn't balance a checkbook to save her life, but she did have big tits and was easy. The high school boys called her meat grazer behind her back. She got this job at a rinky-dink 2-pump gas station as the bookkeeper, can you believe it? Mom did. She had an enormous capacity for denial. When Mom told all her friends proudly that Laurie was working as a bookkeeper at this particular gas station, all her friends knew of it, they all looked at her like she was either joking or crazy. Laurie was no doubt taking lessons in bookkeeping. There were many nights that she would pick me up from work, drive over to Bill the mechanic's place in the bad part of town, go in and stay a long time. What else could she have been up to? I, of course, sat in the car, waiting and worrying that the wheels would be stolen while I cowered in the back seat. Given that backstory, to my surprise, Laurie objected to me riding home with Kathy M. I stubbornly insisted that I was riding home with Kathy M. A few minutes later, Mom called. "You're riding home with your sister," she shrieked. "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. Laurie told me what a little slut Kathy is, and you're not riding home in her car." Well, first of all, Laurie calling someone else a slut? Really? And second, I wasn't riding home in her car. I was planning on driving it. "I've got to get back to work," I said. "I'm riding home with Kathy M. Bye." And I hung the phone up. So I indeed got to drive her car home. But the next morning, boy, oh boy, did I catch hell. Mom was in high dudgeon and cornered me as soon as I was in the kitchen. "Don't you know what that type is up to? Laurie tells me Kathy just wants to have a boy get her pregnant so she can get married. Do you want to get her pregnant and bring shame on the family name?" My conundrum. Confess that, no, I just wanted to drive her car and catch hell. Or say, no, I'm queer and would throw up if I ever got near a vagina, let alone putting it in one, and catch hell. Or just keep my mouth shut and catch hell. I kept my mouth shut. It was all the same to me. As Mom raved on, I reflected on the fact that I was the only one in our household who was not sexually active. Somehow, though, I was the one getting grief about just that topic. Besides, Mom was the one who kept shacking up with her ex-husband after the divorce, so why was she lecturing me about bringing shame on the family name? When I was finally of legal driving age, I discovered that driving lessons could supplement my lawn mowing income. This probably broke some laws about running an unlicensed driving school, but I didn't care. I was 16. It came from one of my lawn mowing jobs. Mowing lawns is a real cliche thing for teenage boys to do, but it helps youngsters learn about things like entrepreneurship, responsibility, and poison oak. One of my customers was Mrs. Chang. Mrs. Chang was 62 years old, Chinese, and she was only in the country 2 years. Her language skills were pretty good considering she had to learn English to come here, and at 60 years old at that. She was a really, really sweet old lady, always insisting I drink soy milk, which she would send home with me because it was good for me. She actually cooked the beans herself because this was the days before packaged soy milk. One day, she asked me if I had my driver's license. I was proud to say I had, and made a 99 on the test at that. "I need to learn parallel park. You teach me parallel park?" she asked. "I need to learn parallel park to get license. We go in my car, and you teach me parallel park, and I pay you." Pay. That's all the convincing I needed. So we met the following morning to go over to the high school parking lot in her big white Chevrolet land barge. She drove because she had the learner's permit, and I rode shotgun. We got there without incident. Now, I had never taught before, let alone taught someone with a language barrier, and tons of Detroit's finest steel to worry about. We had a few false starts, but by the end of the day, Mrs. Chang was parking, if not like a pro, at least like she was passingly familiar with the process. Just why they require parallel parking in Oklahoma City escapes me. It's not like a real city. In Oklahoma City, you can just drive up to any old curb and park. We practiced a few more times over the next week, and then Mrs. Chang declared that she was ready to take her driving test. Would I go with her? Sure, this was on the clock. After getting in line for the car inspection and passing that, Mrs. Chang went into the building while I skulked around outside. Presently, an officer with a clipboard appeared and escorted her to her car. They got in and settled in and drove off. I braced myself for a long wait, but to my surprise, they were back quite soon. The officer got out and steadied himself on the car. He looked pale, his hands were shaking, and there were dark sweat stains under his arms. "Are you with her?" he demanded as I walked up. "Yes." "You drive home. Got it?" "Yes, sir." Poor Mrs. Chang. She sat in the passenger seat, dejected, holding the examination form, which looked like it had bled to death for all the red marks. Wrong way down a one-way street. Below minimum speed on the freeway. Wrong way down an exit ramp. Not stopping for a red light. On and on. She didn't even get to parallel park. "Can you teach me to drive? I drive good if you teach. I pay you to teach," Mrs. Chang pleaded. "Okay, Mrs. Chang, I'll teach you. You'll need to practice, but we'll get you to pass that test," I replied, with all of the bravura of a 16-year-old who was ignorant as to all that could go horribly wrong. Before going out on the road, we started by studying the driving manual from the DMV. I quizzed her about all the rules of the road, down to the hand signals, just in case her back lights weren't working. Once I felt confident that she knew the rules of the road, we went driving. So began the arduous task of teaching a timid 62-year-old how to drive one of those mid-70s land barges and not to be afraid to do it. We went out in all types of traffic, starting with mid-morning traffic to get her used to the rules, then progressing up to the freeway. After telling Mom about the first freeway experience, Mom started joking about getting me a life insurance policy. The first time we tried the freeway, I demonstrated first showing how to accelerate, signal, check the traffic, and blend into the oncoming traffic. Then we changed drivers, and it was her turn. Mrs. Chang pulled onto the on-ramp. Good. Accelerated. Good. Merged. Good. And just as she got on the roadway, she lost her nerve. She slammed on the brakes, stopping dead in the middle of speeding traffic, closed her eyes, and started shrieking with her hands over her eyes, "God help me! God help me!" God help me! Here I was, a 16-year-old, seeing my life flashing before my eyes, and it didn't take long. The only thing I could think of to do was to stay calm and say in as soothing a voice as I could muster, "Go, Mrs. Chang. Go. Go, please. Finally, with squealing tires all around telling me that some poor bastards were backing up over themselves to keep from hitting us, Mrs. Chang floored it. We survived that one. There were other hitches while we had the lessons, but one in particular made a lasting impression on Mrs. Chang. I wanted to get her used to 5 o'clock traffic, so out we went. At one point, as we were turning a corner, actually she was creeping around the corner, some jerk behind us was laying on his horn for the entire turn. I turned around and flipped him off as he zoomed past. My contribution to traffic civility. Nothing much was said until we returned to Mrs. Chang's house. Ken? Yes, Mrs. Chang? What does this mean? She extended her middle finger to mimic the hand gesture I had used earlier. Oh, I was just telling him not to honk his horn. That's the hand signal for that. It's very useful. Oh, by the way, Mrs. Chang did pass her test, not with flying colors, but she passed. She did ask me why they didn't question her on all the hand signals, raising her middle finger. I assured her that they just probably forgot. But back to my high school experience. Something good did happen in my senior year to relieve some of my torment. Our school mascot was the Putnam City West Patriots, and we were the spirit of 76. Oh boy, what an imagination. Stacy Jones was the most popular senior in the class, and she was voted Miss Patriot, the highest honor. She also happened to date David Pierce, the other suspected homosexual in our class. Stacy sat behind me in psychology class. Now, there were 2 reasons I took psychology. The first was to learn what was wrong with me and how to fix it. I gained a good bit of knowledge in this class. I learned that you have a 40% chance of curing your own neurosis. That was good enough odds for me. The other reason I took psychology was that Mom didn't want me getting out of school until as late in the day as possible. I could have gotten out at noon because I had enough credits, but no. Lori and Kathy got to. But somehow I was different. I think Mom believed I would get into trouble if left to my own devices. I wonder where she got that idea. Anyway, Stacy Jones sat behind me in psychology class. One day in January, we were talking, and she suddenly said, "You know, you're really cool." Yeah, I thought. But that comment started something. Stacy would be seen with me in the halls, actually talking to me, something socially risky for her as I was such a pariah, but she seemed to enjoy doing it. Then, one by one, the popular people in the school would say a tentative hi, then hello, and then it eventually accelerated to a point where these popular people sat at my lunch table in the cafeteria. A word on this table, I called it the filler group. We weren't the jocks or jockettes, the theater group, the debate team, or the art crowd. We were the odd handful of people who just wanted to get in, get the education, and then get the hell out. High school was not the pinnacle of our existence. We, for the most part, didn't go in for extracurricular activities because we all had after-school jobs, and we were not considered particularly good-looking or popular. Having all the popular people visit our table was a thoroughly curious experience. The filler group had some cool people in it. One of these people was Marilyn Swartzinski. She was valedictorian and had the dual handicap for Okie women. She was smart and was not regarded as good-looking, nor was she blonde. She was pudgy with frizzy dark hair and thick glasses. Marilyn was funny, and I liked her wicked wit, especially when it was directed at the mouth breathers and knuckle draggers. The jocks would knock her down in the halls. That was their idea of wit. Woo. Another in this group was Janie Fryer. Janie looked like olive oil in the Popeye comics, but with waist-length hair. Her looks are the type that get better with age. She looks terrific now. Janie's family was retired military, and her mother was used to doing the protocol thing that a commander's wife did. I remember one night when she held a dinner party for Janie and some of the other members of the group, and it was run just like an embassy function, with finger bowls, place cards, and everything. Janie was what I would call a real Joe. She was the one in the science classes who volunteered for the really gross experiments and didn't get all freaked out with the dissecting eyeballs like I would, sissy that I am. I reconnected with her just a couple of years ago. As I said, she looks great now. She's far more interesting than I remember her, and she was interesting then. Now she's working periodically in Benin with the woman there, teaching them ways to improve hygiene and thus improve infant mortality rates. Janie and I went to the prom together because we were pals. I asked her because Mom insisted I go. I didn't want to go, but Mom kept at it. She said, "If you don't go, you will regret it for the rest of your life. You can't replace these memories," as if I wanted to remember high school. Finally, I said, "If you want me to go so bad, you'll have to pay for it. I don't want to spend the money." I thought that was the safest dodge, as anything requiring Mom to dip into her pocket would automatically be nixed. Usually worked like a charm. To up the ante, I said, "And besides, if you want me to go, you have to let me use your car." This was a silver 1976 Cadillac Coupe de Ville with the half-vinyl top and red striped velour interior, a real land yacht with all the power toys inside. It also had opera windows. Apparently, Cadillac was anticipating a craze for drive-in opera. To my surprise, she paid for everything, and she let me use the car. So I miscalculated. I had no choice. Off to Janie's to ask. Mrs. Fryer acted like I had proposed marriage. You see, in Oklahoma, who you took to the prom was usually who you were expected to marry. At the very least, you were expected to boink 'em. I didn't want to do either. She made Janie this dress. It was very scarlet pulls down the curtains green velvet with long ivory lace sleeves in May. I'm sure the thinking was that Janie could wear it for the holidays as well, making it a practical, if not comfortable, choice. Mrs. Fryer took so many photos of the two of us before we left their house that I worried she'd climb up on the hood of the car to take one through the windshield, which thankfully didn't happen. I was concerned, though. I had just washed and waxed the car and didn't want her up there smudging it. Thankfully, the prom photos were destroyed in a horrible fire that burned their house to ashes a couple of years later, much to my relief. There are now no blackmail photos of chubby me standing next to Olive Oil, who looked like she had an appointment with Rhett Butler. As for me, I was wearing a white dinner jacket, but not a ruffled front shirt. I drew the line there and chose a pleated front shirt. I had shoulder-length, late 70s hair that was feathered and highlighted with sun in, and black, very high platform shoes. I was grateful for the platform shoes. Janie was easily a head taller than me. Graduation night was the happiest moment of my Oklahoma existence, next to moving to California, which came later. I was getting out of that damn high school and its small-minded energy. At the commencement, I was sitting in a row with a good mix of popular people and filler group. There were mixed feelings about this. I was happy that I was somewhat liked after all, but there was a part of me that felt like saying, "Where were you all when I really needed you?" It was easy for them to like me after getting Stacy's blessing. Fast forward again to my 10-year reunion. I felt a hug from behind, and it was Stacy. She looked wonderful. She took a gig as a drama professor in Bloomington, Indiana. I remarked that she was so talented. Why didn't she go into the theater? "I didn't want to be a waitress wanting to be an actor," she said. "I'm realistic about this business. This is a good gig for me." We caught up on things, and finally she hugged me and said, "There were only 2 people I really wanted to see, and you were one of them." Despite myself, I felt all warm inside. After all, better late than never. Stacy made my last days in high school bearable, and I'll always be grateful to her and remember her fondly for that. Then I saw Marilyn Swartzinski. She looked fabulous. She lost weight, she got contact lenses, and she's done really well for herself. We caught up, and I learned that she became a professor at MIT or something brainy like that. "And you know the best thing?" she said. "What?" I asked. "I inherited several $1,000,000. You know the guys who used to push me down in the halls? They suddenly find me very beautiful and very fascinating, and I have had the distinct pleasure of telling every last one of them to fuck off. Yes, there is a God, and yes, she does answer prayer." I was talking with Mom about the reunion the next morning over breakfast. She had gone to her 30th class reunion after being the second largest graduation gown in her graduating class. At the time of this reunion, she had perfected the look that lives in my memory to this day. She looked like Kim Novak in Vertigo, white blonde hair done up in a French twist, trim, tailored gray suits on a 99-pound frame. I remember the outfit she wore to that reunion, as it was one of my favorites of hers from that time. It was a matte black Yves Saint Laurent-inspired wool double-breasted dinner suit with faint matte silver lurex pinstripes. Under the jacket was a matte silver lurex t-shirt, and she wore black patent pumps with grosgrain bows, and her hair was up. At her reunion, she didn't wear a name badge because she wanted to see if anyone would recognize her. Eventually, she ran into the captain of the football team who had gone to seed, a high tattoo-to-tooth ratio and no hair, and fat. He was going on about old anime Yockers, what a big fat pig she was in high school. Oh my God, she must be enormous by now. Wow, boy oh boy was she fat. So Mom just smiled sweetly, waiting. Then he noticed she wasn't wearing a name badge. "Who are you?" he asked. She looked at him and said, "I'm Anime Yockers." And she told me it was worth the wait of 30 years to watch him want the ground to open up and swallow him. She never went to another reunion, and neither have I. I don't feel the need to. Class reunions, one more step towards being a grown-up. In our next episode, called Window Display is Calling Me, we will hear how our main character got into the wonderful world of retail window display. We will also learn a new vocabulary word, lesbiterianism. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Please subscribe to my podcast, and if you have questions or comments, reach me through the website allgrownupnow.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Kenneth D. King, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, kennethdking.com. Coming soon to iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher.